another Beekeeping Buddies podcast. I'm Steven.
And I'm Luke.
We're back talking about what we were doing for the past 2 weeks around the yard. And I think the thing on top of the list is taking honey. At least it was for me. July 4th weekend is when I typically take honey, and I harvested.
Yeah, and how was it?
Pretty good. I had 125 pounds off of about 4 hives. Although one of those hives I brought into the apiary late. It was a late purchase. The one that came with the Flow Hive, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it probably came with close to 30 pounds of honey in and of itself. So I sort of brought some in, if you will.
Yep.
But the rest of it was on premises.
But that hive was queenless, right?
It was.
Yeah. That's the one that when I walked up to it, when I was helping the person who we bought it from, I walked up to it. And as I walked up, the swarm flew out of it.
Yeah.
So I was pretty sure they were probably queenless. Should have requeened by the time that we got to them. Should have.
Yeah.
Probably right at that fuzzy area.
At the time I had a split that, it was a,
spring split, right?
No, it was a swarm cap that had lived in its swarm cap box for 3 too many weeks. And I ended up doing a cutout because it had filled the bottom of the swarm box.
I have one of those in Chillicothe right now.
Yeah.
Actually. Yep.
And so I had moved them. I did the cutout procedure and moved them over to a 10 frame, and they were already expanding outside the 10 frame like 2 weeks after that. So the timing was just right to set the queenless box on top of that existing 10 frame that needed expansion. So it worked out.
Well, that's good.
And they've been really active, really successful. I didn't get in them because the honey, we call it a super, but it was actually a deep. I put on top of the Flow Hive, and I didn't want to get all the way through the Flow Hive and take the queen excluder off and actually get down in there. But now that I've got the honey super, we'll call it the super off, then I need to
deep super.
Yeah, it was a deep, and I tell you what, man, like. I've had it in the past where you get a hive that decides that it doesn't like the honey, the medium you put on top for honey, and they're just going to start. Or maybe you were kind of late getting to it.
Yep.
They started backfilling upstairs in the deep, and then they just decided that this is where they wanted to put it, and they put it all there. And I tell you what, man, they're heavy to move, and in this case, in the past I've ones and twosied some frames over. If you get a hive that's got like 6 out of the 10 frames all capped. Yeah. They're still using 4 in the middle. You'll take the ones and twosies, 3, 4 off the sides, and pull them out one at a time, brush them off, and put them in another deep, an empty deep, and move them around that way. And that's really not that bad. But that entire deep, like I was going to move it as an entire deep of honey because I knew it was all that, and like it was about all I ever wanted to lift.
Yeah.
And we got it up to the house. And I specifically got out the bathroom scale and put it on the scale, and it was 73 pounds.
And it's not a comfortable lift.
No,
and you're not a tiny guy.
Yeah.
You move goats around, right?
Yeah.
Goats are strong animals and big, and it's not pleasant. I've moved it too, especially when you get it overhead.
Yeah,
it's a awkward overhead to.
You're pulling from chest height, from the top of the hive.
Yep, and I routinely get stung because, I'm pulling it down and I'll be holding it against me. And they sting through the suit when you press that suit close. It's just not. It's not fun.
So, and that was, people aren't, if you're wondering, all 10 frames were nicely drawn, and I would say only about a half a frame off of a half a side may not be completely drawn or completely drawn out or capped, but for the most part,
so it's almost entirely, totally full.
There's not a lot. Maybe you could squeak 75, 78 pounds out of.
That's when you use the little handler that we have for the the hive mover handler.
Hive mover? I don't know, man, because in there, I feel like you're even farther. Your arms are either higher up in the air,
Yeah,
you're
but
trying to lift it
split
off.
the weight with 2 people.
If it's that one, but I don't think that deal works as two people. I think it's just intended for one person to one hand in each hand.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
The online photos of it show just one guy.
That's not how I
working
would use
two
that.
handles. Yeah,
That's
I
not
know,
how I
right?
would do that. No. I would go get my buddy and be like, "Hey, you're taking these handles." But even then, it's kind of awkward unless you have single hive stand, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll work.
So so then I took 4 other mediums, 9-frame mediums. I have my honey supers that I have dedicated specifically to 9 frames. I've got the physical dividers that I've attached to inside of them, and I think I'm finally going to retire 2 of the older boxes.
Oh.
When I was moving them back out to the yard, one of them fell off the stack.
Oh,
and about pancaked.
It retired for you.
Yeah, I mean, I knocked her back into square, but she's awfully loosey goosey now.
Yeah.
And there's the couple of them. The bottom corners are getting pretty good sized, finger sized rotted holes in the bottom corners. Which for honey supers, I really don't care, right? Because it's just another entrance.
Yeah.
Halfway up the hive.
Well, the rotted portion is what makes me annoyed.
Yeah.
Because you get the little hive beetles and the buggers that like to hide in there, and that's just not.
And like I think those were some used woodenware that I bought when I first got started back in 2008. So I mean, they've certainly got their life use out of them. I'll probably harvest the little metal divider dealy bobs out of the top.
Yeah, I love the 9-frame spacers.
9-frame spacers, yeah. And just put those in some new boxes. I've got some other equipment that I could cut down that I had acquired when somebody else retired and left behind an entire, half of a storage container full of old equipment sitting around. So I'll probably cut some of those down into 9-frame or mediums from deeps. Most of them were deeps.
Yeah, cut some of the mediums into spacers for like feeding shins or something like that too. That'd be good.
For candy boards and stuff.
Candy boards.
Yeah. So it was good harvest. I don't know. It's always a challenge, because it's hot. It's July. It was 90s, and you just never want to go out there and sweat and get stung. And
yeah, I'm going out with the intern every day during the week, basically. Ben, the intern, and it's hot. I sweat a lot already to start with, and I sweat through this week. I sweat through my shirt. I sweat through my jeans, and I had some dripping off the bottom of my jeans this week. It's not a look that I think is going to win any awards.
I mean, that's just working.
But it's a lot of water. I mean, it's a ton of water intake. Staying away from soda, and then you also have to have like a Pedialyte or something for some of the electrolyte because I
Gatorade or something.
Yeah.
So you get out there. I use BeQuick, and of course, I couldn't find my BeQuick, and then you go sort that out. And then I use for the last bunch of years, I've used a full sheet baking tray.
Yeah.
And I spray my BeQuick on the back side of that tray and then set that tray on top, and it gets hot in the sun, and it really off gases, really dries them off pretty quick. And so it worked just like it's advertised, man. It pushed them out of the super, and then I can pull it off, and I ended up pulling honey off of 4 different hives. All 4 supers came off of 4 different hives. So it wasn't like I had multiple stacked on a single hive.
I sometimes use BeQuick. But actually, I've been more recently, just so I can look at the frames and understand what I'm looking at, I usually will, before I get into the house, I'm brushing it off with turkey feathers. Use a turkey feather as a bee brush, brushing it off, and then have an empty, it requires you have an empty super or something sitting nearby, right? And then I move it to that. It's also, I also have another person doing it with me, right? So so I'm brushing one side, he's brushing the other side, and we're trying to move through pretty quick. Keeps me from picking up a queen too. I've used BeQuick before. It's been 3 or 4 years probably, and I had at one time I used BeQuick, and I was carrying things back and forth with a wheelbarrow because I was dumb, and it's a decent hike, 50 yards at least to go back from the yard to my honey house, and in the wheelbarrow on my way back there was a queen crawling around.
I mean,
I know I've killed queens before that way. So this is. I'm just more careful.
All of mine were 100% honey supers. I didn't have any brood in mine this year. I know in the past.
Well, I've assumed that mine were all honey supers at the time, but I don't use a queen excluder, so that's going to be one of the dangers of not using a queen excluder.
I didn't have a queen excluder. Well, the only queen excluder I have on is on the Flow Hive. But for my other ones, they were all solid honey. No queen activity in them, so I wasn't worried about having a queen up there.
I almost never have queen activity, but every once in a while, once in a blue moon, she's wandering around someplace that you wouldn't think to find her. So, what about your cut comb?
Oh, yeah. So I dedicate, I've got probably a half a dozen, 8. Well, it was 27 squares, and I get about 4 squares out of a frame.
Yeah, it's almost perfectly 4 squares.
6 times 4 is 24, so maybe 5 frames, because a couple of them I didn't take completely all the way across because it wasn't drawn and capped nice.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty enough.
Yeah, and so I have frames that I haven't used foundation in. The first years I put thin surplus. I have some thin surplus for a foundation.
Which is just beeswax foundation, right? It's just a real thin.
It's super thin.
So it doesn't have any. You can't even. I've used it too. You can't even feel it in your teeth. Like you can't tell.
Yeah. So I think the first couple of years I started with that, but now what I do is when I cut them out, so they don't have any wire, no wires, horizontal or vertical wires in it, and so now when I've marked those cut comb CC on the top of those frames, and so now when I cut out, I've got one of the little square cookie cutter looking things that are supposed to cut out a piece to fit the little tubs, the little
clamshells, or you can get them. You get like the heavier duty ones, but I think they're only available from Dedant.
I did not go with those. I think the heavy duty ones are slightly larger and are sized better for the square thing. The clamshells are slightly smaller, and so I simply use the square cookie cutter as a marking tool. I sort of imprint the top of the comb, and then I take a sharp cooking knife.
Yeah,
and I cut it with a sharp knife.
It depends on. I find it depends on the cut comb that I do. Like if it's got, there's some that I can press through real easy.
Yeah,
and there's some that are stiffer.
If the comb is a year old, it's not this season's comb.
Yeah, it's
the comb will be real stiff. So then after you've cut those out, you're left with a frame that is probably pretty. Maybe there's a 1/4 of an inch of comb on the bottom, and then there's a strip of left wax, about 3/4 to an inch thick on the top.
Yep.
And some people will cut that off and use it as chunk honey or something like that. I just leave it on the frame. And then that's my starter strip for next year.
I do the same thing.
And so then they start building from that. So last year I did that, and there was some frames that you could tell they had just redrawn inside that little cutout. And so it works really well.
Yeah.
And they had done a really good job of drawing frames this year for cut comb. So I think I had, like I said, 27. We put them on the scale. If they're right at 12 ounces, I might have a couple that are a little over.
What do you sell those for?
$20.
So I sell them for $25.
Yeah,
and you usually sell them word of mouth.
All of my sales are word of mouth. I do have a fresh honey sign in the front yard on my prominently busy street that I live on.
Yeah,
local highway.
Like fresh. You have eggs too.
I have eggs and honey, and I've been doing that for several years now. And there have been people that stop by and ask if I have cut comb, and in the past I've said yes, and those people now know that they can get cut comb, and then I've told them, hey, July 4th is when I harvest, and I kid you not, we got messaged probably a half a dozen times over the weekend. Did we harvest honey? Do we have honey? And do you have cut comb?
Yeah. And
so my cut comb customers will start coming in, like probably within the next week or two.
Do you do any chunk comb? Do you use quart jars and throw some honey in there?
I have in the past. They have not sold. I didn't have any takers on. They're still on my shelf. And then 3 of the nice. So if you cut the 4 squares out on the end, you're left with about 1.5 inches little leftover chunk.
Yeah.
And I do tend to have a tendency to cut those off. So I'll leave the top strip and the bottom strip, but not the little chunk on the side. So I have like 2 or 3 clamshells that have like 2 or 3 of those pieces put in the clamshell.
Mine I harvest off the top of those styrofoam lids. They've got this little, what do you say, 1 inch maybe? 1 inch gap that's there?
No, it's not 1 inch. It's more like 2.
All right.
So on your 6-frame China,
even my all of my ones,
no, you're nice. I always call them the Finland ones.
Yeah,
I have
Finland's,
those. The Finland ones have flat top.
No, mine has a gap in them.
No.
Okay, so not the Finland ones then.
Yes.
The Lyson nukes.
Yes.
Those have a gap in them, and they fill that with.
And it's not
comb.
This is not a small gap. This is a sizable.
Yeah, they fill
2-inch hollow top.
Yeah.
That exists for an unknown reason.
I think it's for like feeder or shim or something along. I don't know what it's really for. I use it. They tend to fill. They tend to fill it with comb on every single hive that I have that I use this on.
Yes.
And it's always filled with honey. Yes. And it makes the lid real heavy, so it doesn't blow away. So I don't complain about it too much. And then 2, I go through and we use that for pieces of comb. It's not really cut comb, but it's not
because it's all natural. It's all natural built, right? Like
yeah.
It's not in regular little shapes. It's all
it's in regular shapes.
Yeah,
people really like it. I sell it to restaurants. Restaurants only use it for like charcuterie boards.
Yeah,
and they take a strip of it anyway, so it's really good for them.
I mean, if you've got a market for it, you've made it. You made it work for what it is. If you were the average Joe out there, I would certainly recommend building some little custom inner covers that go on top of the hive and kind of fill up that space because it can be problematic if you've got small hive beetles or something else that can escape up in there.
It does. If you have weak hives, small hive beetles will use that. They will corral those hive beetles even up in that area.
Speaking of our Flow Hives, we both have one. Mine was on top of that hive that produced that, capped off that nice 40-something pounds of honey. Oh, to finish my 73 pounds, the wife put the empty tin frame on the same scale, 40-ish pounds. I think it was 30-something pounds after it was empty. So we pulled a full 40-something, 42, 43 pounds off of that deep. So it's like a bucket, full 5-gallon bucket. I mean, not full because I use the drop-in
filters
screens on the top, and when you put a drop-in screen on the top, right, you lose about 5 inches of the top of the bucket.
Yeah, but it holds about 45 pounds with that drop-in screen. Yeah,
so if you're figuring you're not filling up that last 5 inches of the bucket because you pulled your screen out and then put a cap, put a top on, it's right at 45 pounds.
So right now your cappings are draining?
I only let them drain for about 2 days.
Yeah. And how much honey did you measure how much honey you pulled off of your cappings?
That did get weighed, although I don't have that number off the top of my head.
I find that there's actually more there. There's a surprising amount there.
It was probably a good 20 pounds from 125 pounds of honey.
Yeah, it's not a small amount.
And like I said, I uncapped. 9 times 3 is 27 plus 4 is 41. 31, right? 31 mediums.
Yes.
And 10 deeps is what I uncapped for my cappings tank.
So I guess my message out to beekeepers who are like, well, do I really need that? Is that really significant or not? I would say yes, and it's significant.
Now mind you, I specifically run 9-framers, so it's easier to uncap. And if you're aggressive in your uncapping, you'll slice off a good 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch of of honeycomb full of honey. So like there's a volume of honey there that is not insignificant.
Yep.
So you might get away with less honey in your cappings if you're using a different uncapping method on 10 frames that are not fat. But for the method that I use that is easy to do it by hand with a heated knife.
Yeah, easy and quick is what I look for,
yeah.
And that requires a capping tank.
And plus I got the capping tank, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's designed to be used that way. And I've already put the capping tank out into the yard. I put the equipment out in the yard. It's all cleaned up, and it was all, that was on, we did that on Saturday, and we put it all out on Sunday, and it was all cleaned up by Sunday night, and Monday they were basically ignored it, and I had put the 10 frame deep into as an actual, I put it into it as a deep service for a 6 frame nuke that needed to be expanded into a real hive. So
yeah, that's a good use
should
for
not
them, right?
be.
It's already drawn.
It's already drawn.
They clean it up real fast, and it's some resources.
And so it'll be properly used as a deep and not a honey super, as it shouldn't be, unless you're a commercial guy and you got a crane to lift that stuff. But
yeah.
Not us. Back to the Flow Hive. We both have one.
Yeah.
Have you been watching yours?
I went through it.
Do you peek at? I'm like, you got a lot going on in your apiary. You ever go over and peek at the little windows in your Flow Hive?
So on Saturdays I run tours.
Yeah.
So pulling that window off would be really interesting if they worked my Flow Hive. Mine started with like a quote unquote air quotes queen excluder on there.
Yeah.
That was a propolis trap.
Propolis trap, yeah.
And so they weren't working. They were propolizing it off. So now they're mostly working it, but really they're kind of in there half-heartedly. It's much more interesting to pull a frame.
So, what have you noticed for activity in your Flow Hive?
Very limited. Like are they using it? Sort of. Like it's like they're going up there and they're not sure what to do with it, and so they're kind of repairing some stuff in there.
So I've pulled the side covers and watched, and then I've pulled the end cover where you could get to the taps, and looking down through the middle of it, my hive has actually got decent activity in that box now that I've taken the top box off. And they seem to have gone through, again, I have not pulled any of the Flow Hive frames out themselves to study them.
So I physically pulled them out.
So I'm just looking through the little side windows, and from both sides I can see. So if you've never looked at a Flow Hive before, there's 2 parts that make up a hexagon piece of cell, and the idea is that vertically down each one of those groups of hexagons, there's a split so that you can shift the right side of the hexagon cell up or down from the left side of the hexagon cell. And by doing so, you can, when they're manufactured, there's a gap, right? And so they have to go through, and the gap exists for the express purpose of being able for the bees to fill the gap with wax, and then later, so that we can shift the 2 sides of the cell with the magic that is the
key.
They
call it a key.
Yeah, the Flow Hive technology, if you will. They'll shift those cells, and it breaks all those little wax bridges and allows honey to flow through the gaps down to the bottom of the frame, and then therefore out of you take the little cap off the bottom, right? So mine appear to have been going through and waxing every single one of those little gaps, and they appear to have almost all of them waxed up, from what I can tell, at least on the outside. I assume that if they got to the outside ones, that they're doing they've done the inside ones already.
Well, they usually start from inside to out,
inside
right?
out, yeah.
So, but they store from storing outside tends to be they lay the inside, but there's no queen excluder there's a queen excluder on this, so they're not going to lay it, so they'll probably work inside out still.
They tend to. So from the end view, you can definitely tell there's more activity in the seams of the middle of that, because there's only 8 of those frames in there or something.
Not even, I think there's
6?
7. It's 7 because it's a weird number.
Yeah.
Because I've asked people how many frames they have, and when you get a weird number like it's not 9 or 10 or not 8.
Yeah.
It's like 7. Then you know, oh, okay, I'm dealing with somebody that has a flow hive.
Yeah. So they're working it. I still don't think there's any honey in it. I don't plan to leave it on that much longer. We were talking offline about what we're going to do with them. You're just going to store yours in your garage, and I guess I'm going to take mine off and flip it up and let them clean it out and then take it into the barn, I guess. I don't normally store my equipment inside, so this will be – I kind of want to store that inside because I don't want that getting mouse.
I'm going to put a board above and below it so that it's safer, right?
Yeah.
I don't have mice or hive beetles hiding in there.
Well, things. Yeah. I mean, will it get wax moth? Because it's not really wax.
I don't know.
I mean, all these things that you normally deal with, right? Like it's sort of a different ball game with this, and so we still have a lot of.
And it has to come off because they'll abandon the queen, right? Like if they run out of food, if it's full of honey, and it's just
they can't move up to it in the winter.
Right.
Like you're not going to leave it on for winter.
Yeah, so it's got to come off.
So, yeah, still working with that. We also have, it's been a couple of weeks since we grafted the last time we were on the show. And you want to tell us about how our grafts went?
Yeah, so we ended up with about 9 cells. Of the 9 cells, a couple, I think we had 1 or 2 that didn't hatch.
How many did we do by hand? 3 rows?
3 rows.
What was in a row? 10-ish?
10-ish.
Yeah.
And we had like 9 of the 30 take.
Okay, so not great, but
not
I mean, like, still 9 more queens than we would have had.
Yeah. And some of I had some 3-frame queen rearing boxes that we put together.
We built some of those queen castles.
Right. And so in those queen castles, one of them, or 2 of them, didn't have queens. The queen had gone. I had queens in there before. They'd gone on mating flights and never made it home. Well past their time of they should have queens.
Yeah.
So I took 2 cells per each of those. I probably could have done 1, but the cells weren't massive and long. Weren't as pretty as I thought they should be. So I took 2 of the smaller ones and put them in those for each side. So there's 4 of those.
That was in your existing queen castle, or some of the new ones?
That was an existing queen castle. And then I threw together 3 more queen castles, so 9 more frames.
And so what were you putting in as a starter for a queen castle? So to catch everybody up at home, because I don't think we talked about this, because this could be also in our Around the Yard segment.
Yeah.
We recycled some older equipment that you acquired that had rotten edges.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because it all came from the same site.
And it was double painted.
And we were thinking that maybe the double painted, both inside and out, which typically nobody that I know of recommends painting the inside of their hive bodies.
Right.
And so we're thinking that maybe because painting the inside has sealed moisture in the wood, and that's what has contributed to it rotting much quicker than what our normal beekeeping equipment would typically perform.
I'm not sure what it was, but we cut the ends of it off. We hammered some stuff together.
Replaced. We basically cut a 2-inch strip off the top and or bottom, depending on what was rotten. We replaced it with a 2-inch strip, and then we proceeded to put 1/2-inch dividers in there, so that we have 2 1/2-inch dividers. So we have 3 compartments. We took dedicated bottom boards, and we cut entrances on either side and the front.
Yep. And if you're having a hard time visualizing this, we basically took it deep and split it into 3 different parts.
Yeah. So each third
part
holds
has an entrance.
3 frames.
Right.
1 entrance to the front, 1 on the left side, 1 on the right side.
Yep.
And then there's 3 top cover boards, because you don't want to take one cover board off all 3 hives at the same time.
Yeah, they actually will sit there and they meet each other and then they start fighting. So you work one little hive, mini hive at a time. Yep.
So what were you stacking out of your 3 frames? What were you putting in there?
2 frames of brood / a little bit of honey, full of nurse bees, and usually 1 frame of either drawn or partially drawn comb.
So were you stealing frames out of, like 2 frames out of, would you say you made up 6? 6 or 9?
I made up 3 for 4.
So
I sold 12 frames out of different hives.
So 12 frames out of 12 hives?
12 frames out of probably 8 hives.
So on average, it was 1 to 2 frames.
1 or 2 frames. Depends on how confident I was from the hive, what their length pattern was, what other brood they had.
Because the other way to do it would be just like take 2 hives and completely break them down, right? Like and then leave a frame that's got a queen on it and just move it to a 5 frame and just start as a nuke and just start over, right? Basically.
Yeah, I just borrowed though. I have some Palmer nukes too that I pulled a frame out of because they're really good resource hives because they grow so fast.
Yeah.
Though my Palmer nukes have 3 sections to them now, right? So there's 12 frames in there, 12 deep.
So you're 4/4/4 now?
No, because they're 4. No.
Yeah. Because if they're 3 high,
they're 4/4/4. Yes. Right now, on 2 different Palmer nukes, 2 different setups, 2 complete.
I'm giving them the side eye for all of the listeners.
Yeah, because we're just shooting numbers at you guys.
And
so
I'm like,
basically, there's 4 colonies and 2 hives that are 4/4/4.
Oh man, what are you doing?
They'll survive well and well. They survive. They do well. Almost all. Like my survival rate in Palmer nukes is way higher. Is unusually high. Like I would say.
So you think there's something? Think there's something to it then?
I don't know if it's because I'm constantly stealing from them and they have to keep drawing frames, or it's because it's a higher concentration of oxalic acid when I vaporize them, or like it's a better distribution of. They also really chimney really well. Bees do, like in a small area. If you let them chimney, they like that chimney effect.
I have seen the chimney effect, right? Like I've got a story of a guy who ran all mediums, and they ran, it was a stack of like 10 mediums tall, and they ran the same 3 frames right up the center of that giant stack.
They really like that 3 and 4 frame setup, and they draw it super fast, right? And you're also crowding them because...
I've always heard that crowding leads to better hive. I don't know what
survival
management working.
Yeah,
the hive works better when it's crowded.
Yeah,
I definitely have heard
they
that.
Got better. I mean, they got better population to control a better area.
So to be clear, for all of our potential new beginners out there, when we talk about space management of a hive, like one of the things that's always difficult to communicate to beginners. What is the most frequent question we get after you get your package?
When do I add
When do you add your second package? Yep. And so understanding space management for a growing hive and understanding, hey, if you have a sickly hive or something's happened and they've reduced population and willing to reduce a hive, and again, force it down and collapse it in size and give it less space to work, really does
super
benefit. Yeah, it really does benefit the hive in terms of how quickly it will build. There's something to it. I can't explain it.
They'll bounce back from being sickly if you take away their space.
Yeah.
Now you also have to watch them and go, oh, okay, you guys are ready.
Are you still going to be a beekeeper?
Yeah.
But that there's something to it, and I don't pretend to understand it, but I can definitely speak to how effective it is in managing space in a hive.
And I expect to, just for clarity, I expect to actually probably add another Palmer nuke to my setup next year. Just because I steal from them so often to balance out hives. So,
and this, I feel like this is touching on the politics of beekeeping.
It probably is.
Because here's where I want to push, here's where I want to take this. Horizontals versus versus the Palmer, right? Because there are a lot of people that love their horizontals. There's a lot of people that swear by the horizontals.
There's not many people that run Palmers.
And no, I mean, obviously, was it Jim? Paul, what's his first name? I don't know. Obviously, the guy up in New York. Is it New York? Maine? He's up there on the eastern seaboard, right? Obviously, he does.
Yep.
But, like, in terms of the number of people that I know that run horizontals and some of the atypical difficulties they work through, I think associated with having to work a horizontal, I am just not convinced that the benefits of the physical labor are worth the difficulties in hive management, right? Growth, survivability.
Certainly not when you have abnormal frames. Like if you're using
sizes,
like weird shapes or sizes, I would not ever do that, especially when I'm running as many hives as I am. It's just not worth my time to mess with weird frames.
I just haven't, like, I've seen some ones that have been successful, but at the same time, they've had issues come up that have been difficult to manage because you can't do the same things you can do with them that you're used to doing with a vertical hive.
I can't complain about it yet. I don't have one. I haven't worked one.
You going to add one to your apiary for all of your?
I don't want to. I probably will. I probably will have one.
No. Here's the second question: are you going to go like standard deep frames in a horizontal setup, or are you going to go full Kenyan top bar hive?
No, standard deep frames in a horizontal frame. I don't want to have to mess. I want to be able to take my frames out and balance my hives.
Balance them, move them around.
And I can't do that with
a Kenyan top bar.
Top bar.
Or something, with an abnormally deep one or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
so our grafts we did okay. Did we do great? Yeah, we didn't do great. But you know what I did? I regrafted. And so I've got some more queen cells that we're working on. I've got an intern that's working with me. He's doing good, and he grafted some. He had just for clarity, he had a 0 uptake, but there may be a loose queen running around in there.
I mean, you got to understand it's a very delicate procedure, to understand to be successful your first time is that's a real thing. Yeah.
So we've got some beautiful cells on the new ones. I think partially because I didn't give them as many cells.
Yeah.
Right. So chose.
There's certainly something to be said about the population of your cell builder versus how many cells you give them.
Right. And then I did the QC 100 again.
As a reminder, that's the one with all the little eraser cups.
You
put the queen in there and she lays the egg for you.
She laid everything up again, and we moved all of those over again
as eggs,
and they cleared out on two different
occasions.
Queen castles. It's not queen castles, but
cell builders.
Cell builders this time. 2 different ones because I've got 3 in my yard right now.
Yeah.
And they cleaned out all the eggs in both of them. All ate every single egg.
You think there's some instructions we've omitted?
Well, there's no instruction booklet that came with the random.
I mean, you got random gear from the purchase you made, and I think mine was a China set that also didn't come with instructions. But have you ever went and looked for, like, No. Like, is there supposed to be a hatching period?
Have I ever read the instructions? No.
But for all we know, there could be some different instructions on how to be more successful with this.
And here's my theory. My theory is that you release the queen.
Yeah.
And you leave that in there.
Yeah.
For 3 days.
And let the eggs hatch.
And let the eggs hatch. And then you move them over just like you're grafting.
When are you going to science that out?
I might do it this week still. I got a lot of stuff I'm doing right now, though. We're still on. We're well into our podcast, and we're still doing around the yard.
But this is the meat and potatoes of the podcast.
So I'm starting my oxalic acid treatments now. All right, I'm doing my mite counts, starting my acid treatments because I do vaporized OA.
Yeah,
and Although there's capped brood out there, and there's people that are going to be yelling at me at the recording, right? Oh my gosh, you can't do that, right?
Well, to be clear, you've pulled your honey though. The hives that you're currently treating.
Yes, I've pulled my honey off.
Yeah, so that's most importantly.
That's important, but also there's capped brood in there, and vaporized oxalic acid is really, really effective only on capped brood.
Right.
Unless you listen to the guy in last year's Bee Expo, where he did it with capped brood over every 5 to 7 days.
But that's the
recommended hives.
That's the recommended procedure, though, is 3 treatments.
3 treatments, but he did it with capped brood with an increased volume of oxalic acid. So, government, don't come after me, but I'm using the increased volume that they suggested, not the EPA or FDA minimum or maximum. And so
we'll put that in the notes about what our success rate is for our mite treatments with a higher dose of OA.
And I'll certainly go back and actually probably treat again, particularly if we have a long fall like we had a long spring. But I'm doing it before August 12th, which is when is the drop dead date for when you're supposed to have your mites under control.
So I also understand that you've been giving some tours in the apiary for the summer tours.
Man, I had somebody come in from St. Louis.
A 3-hour drive.
3-hour drive to come do a honey tasting and check out some bees, talk about bees, check out the bees, and then I had the largest swarm. Actually, popped the lid on one of my big hives to show them, hey, this is a big hive. The population was kind of
meh.
It was there, right? It was a big hive. It was still a big hive, but I'm like, no, something's wrong. I've been in these guys a lot this year. There's something wrong. And I'm actually saying to them, I'm like, hey, this seems strange to me. They're like, well, what's going on? I'm like, well, the population's here, but it's not as booming as I'd expect it to be. It's like they swarmed. But if they swarmed, they'd be in a tree like over here, and I point, and I kid you not, I point to the swarm that is hanging in the tree. It is a full deep of bees. Like it is. I opened it up the next day, and it is literally ready for, like, if I had never looked into the frames and knew that a lot of those frames were undrawn, I'd be like, okay, you guys are ready for a second deep. So,
and it sounds like that hive had plenty of space, and they seemed to have ignored a lot of it?
They ignored, yeah. I had a ton of space up above them. I had 3 supers on there. They had 1 super that was full of honey, 2 supers, 1 super that was drawn and, like, partially full, and 1 super that had lots of room to draw.
And they found some queen cells in that hive?
I'd found some queen cells. I knew, I was like, well, they'll swarm, maybe, or they're just going to replace the queen, maybe. And so I wasn't too worried about replace the queen or swarm. And because, like, if they're going to swarm, I have swarm traps up. I have hives that are baited with lemongrass oil. I was ready for that. I thought I was ready for that. And I did. I got them captured, but I just didn't think it would swarm. I guess I didn't think it would swarm this late in the season because this is pretty late in the season to swarm. So I just thought they were going to replace the queen. Again, in the 2-inch gap roof is where I saw the queen cells.
Yeah,
and so they had drawn it there, and that's why I knew they were there. So it wasn't a super surprise, but it was a surprise to have it during a beekeeping tour. So.
Sure. So let's move to talk about what's in the news these days. I hear you were on a different podcast called The Indoor Farmer.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a different group that is largely more leaning towards marijuana.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't partake. I just can't. My body doesn't handle it as far as. I don't function.
But our state, it's legal. It's legal.
Yeah.
So it's a crop that can be grown just like anything else.
Absolutely. And then I think there's people that say there's medicinal benefits to it.
Sure.
I'm sure that there is. There's too many studies that say that there are to ignore it. But it was a really interesting, different view, right? Like they usually talk about marijuana, but we were talking about farming, right? It's the indoor farmer, and he talks about like self-sufficiency and knowing where your food comes from and things like that. And the crowd was great. They asked really interesting beekeeping questions. The one I always get asked, right, is still, can you put CBD oil or something like that in honey?
Yeah.
And sure, I'm sure there's people that infuse it. It requires a license,
special license
to do so, and it would also require like a kitchen license.
Sure.
In the state of Illinois, we can't add anything to our honey
Yep.
without having a certified kitchen to do it in.
Because now it becomes a processed product.
Yeah, it becomes a processed food product, right? So, but it was really cool. They had quite a few people listening, like 200, 250 at some point. So it was neat to be in front of a bunch of people talking about honeybees. I mean, it's always fun. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We in the news, it sounds like the Michigan State Beekeepers Association has introduced a program to start getting some VSH queens.
They do. I got an email about it today. I actually asked to be put on the email list to hear. They'll deliver them to you. They're selling virgin VSH queens.
And the difference here is they've been certified?
Certified. They're instrumentally inseminated.
Oh, okay.
So they're instrumentally inseminated VSH.
Yep.
$20 per queen.
Okay.
And they have 3 different varieties. There's the one that the USDA put effort and time into in order to make them the ones that growers use, like other professional apiaries used and helped develop, so that they have gentleness and productivity in there. Is the goal.
Italians?
Yeah, basically Italians. and grow quick and our VSH. So I'm really interested. That's something I probably will put effort into buying from them. They are the club. I've gone to their meetings.
Can you get them this year still, or do you have to be on a waiting list or something?
They're sold out right now from what I see.
I would expect they would be.
I would expect them to be sold out. And so I put myself on hey, let me know when they're available again. Yeah. I know that we have a local beekeeper that purchased them and put them in her hives.
Yeah.
And she was really happy with them. I think I bought 2 nukes from her for somebody else that wanted bees.
Well, speaking of VHS, you have the new UBeeO kit.
I do.
To test for VSH.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like you're going to be using that this year due to their recommendation for an established hive.
It's established hive. It has a population requirement for it. I need to do more research, I think, right? Because the UBeeO kit it's good for a year. The vials.
After you crack the vial, though, right?
No. The vials are good for a year.
Okay, so you have one, so you could use it this year or next.
Yeah, I can use it this year or next. I've got it's a relatively expensive kit. I think it's $275 or something like that for the kit, and it's I bought it because we were going to be pushing Grafting Queens and stuff, and we kind of did, but not really, not to the level I thought. I know it requires a queen that's been in there for 7 weeks.
Yep.
So that means I'm going to use an overwintered queen, right? And
we'd have to have had something from April, right?
Yeah.
Because we're July by now.
Yep. Something from April or overwintered.
Yep.
And then a higher population. So I wanted to test it with. I have hives I could test it on.
Yeah.
I could totally test it. Once you use it, you're supposed to use all of the doses of it on different hives and things like that. But I really want to do a lot of looking into it before I go through and actually use it. And I kind of would like to have something that's like a VSH certified queen.
I was going to say
to use it on to see like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be 70%.
This is why I bring it up right after our previous VSH discussion, is because it seems like a perfect opportunity to get one of those VSH queens and then do some VBO testing to see if we can quantify a difference between the thing that we just got and what we're raising in our own apiary.
Yeah, and then I'm interested too, right? In like, I think the replacement files are, I want to say like $25, but they might be more than that.
I thought you said they were. In my head, they sounded like they were pretty pricey per treatment.
They are
per test.
It is. I think it's $15 or so per test, and there's 5 per, so it's probably $75 per vial.
$50 or $60 is what I think I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I want some of our local guys, like Bloomington. We have a good friend, right? That I would like for him. I would like for him to use it. He's not real excited about it because he thinks it breeds bees that don't like bees. is his words, right?
Okay.
And so I would still, I'm sure he'd be down if I just bought the vial and brought it over. But,
Yeah.
But I'd like to see some of the people that sell bees, that are actively selling bees and queens, that actually use this. And I would like to get their feedback. Hey, what did you find? Right? Because you can ask the seller of something, and they're going to be like, yeah, it's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
Right?
But what data do you have to back it up, right?
Exactly.
So,
and I like real-life data.
I don't know that we have much for our Honeybee Hotline this week.
I have one. I had a good question about what do you do if how do I determine my queen was hiveless? Or not, sorry, hive is queenless. Wow. All right. What do I do? So I have one where they were asked, how do I determine if my hive is queenless? And what are my steps?
So they called wanting a queen, probably?
They wanted a queen.
Yeah.
And I always back people up now, because even though I have queens that I can sell, there's not a ton of them, and I want to make sure they understand what they're getting at, because it's every year I've gotten somebody that wants to buy a queen, they get into it, and they find a queen.
Right.
All right, we've had this discussion. We had Val on. She had the same thing, and you and I had a discussion about that. Like, you were like, I don't know, I think I need a queen.
Yep.
We just waited another week.
Yep.
So they wanted to know what you do, and my suggestion, and the suggestion they'd got from somebody else, is they had multiple hives. Grab a frame of eggs from another hive, put it into your hive that you think is queenless, and see what they do with it. If they draw queen cells off of that, then they're queenless, and you can either let them raise it. And right now it's July, right?
Yep.
We're not quite middle of July, but we're getting close there, and they have time. It could be a month, or it'll be middle of August before they got time to make a new queen.
Yep.
And if not, then you can always pick up a queen from somebody.
Sure. The only question I got was a question about using Formic Pro, and whether or not the weather. They thought, looking at the forecast, that the weather would support Formic Pro treatment. At the time, I think the forecast may have suggested there may have just been one day in there of a 90-degree day for a hive, for just 90, not in the 90s, but just 90. I think now, looking at the forecast, there's some 93 and 95s in there, which I think is probably well over the recommended temperature to use a Formic Pro.
85 is the recommended temperature.
So that's always sort of a gamble if you're in our area for middle of June or August. If you want to use a Formic Pro, you really got to be on your game for. Yeah,
and there's two treatment types. There's a 14-day treatment and a 10 and a 10, like a 20-day treatment. But you can
two strips for 14 days, and then one strip
for 10 days, and then another strip for 10 days.
Yep.
And I got really burned last year by using all 2 strips, and for Formic Pro, I lost a lot of hives, and I think it's probably because the temperature, like they were like peaking over 89 degrees, but I was using 2 strips, and I think that the off-gassing is just too much.
I have only ever used 2 strips, but I have paid attention to my temperatures, and I have gotten my 14 days in when it was below 90, and which is either early in the year because I've noticed some issues, and I'm wanting to treat beforehand, or it's just later in the year and I'm treating in probably September or something, right, where I just don't have the hot temperatures. And I know, depending on your take of treatments, that I know you specifically feel that late August, mid-August is when you should be having your mite treatments finished. But if you're using something like Formic Pro, it's just not an option for our area based on temperatures.
Yeah, unless you get real lucky. Like last year, there was a window that it would have been okay, but it's rough. And you're right. You're treating late, which again, right? We just got Illinois was just changed from a 5 to a 6A as far as our weather goes.
In terms of our zone, our growing zone.
So our growing zone's increasing. So we might be better. My August 12th date may be a little bit off for fall bees, but I pulled that information off of looking at Scientific Beekeeping Online, and for our zone, it looked like August 12th. And if you do the bee math, right, 45 days roughly is the lifespan of of a worker bee. So
Well, yeah, 21 days for brood, right? So every 3 weeks we're going to have another hatch. So 3 weeks from August, that's September, first week of September, and then the last week of September, first week of October, and usually, by October she's probably cutting back pretty well on what she's laying, right?
Yeah.
So,
and biologically speaking, the fat bee body for winter bees is actually started after solstice, which was a couple weeks ago.
yeah.
So that's why I aim for the August 12th date.
So I think for our last segment, for droning on, what we're going to be doing between now and the next time we get together, I think probably it is sort of the doldrums of summer. I've taken honey, which means I'm kind of in a holding pattern, just kind of watching hives, making sure things don't swarm late or otherwise decide they don't like the queen. And then I wind up queenless in August, which has been a thing that typically happens in my hive, at least, or my apiary for at least one hive. I never can tell you why. But having to need a queen in August is certainly something that I have definitely seen multiple times. I think mostly because there's a swarm in July that I don't notice that squeaks out, and then they don't requeen well in August for whatever reason, and I'm stuck looking for
dragonflies and the predators out there. Get them.
And then, our discussion we just had about mites, right? So this is the season to do your mite treatments, and if they're starting to rise up there, you need to get on that and treat them because you're going to be running out of time.
And if you do get a late fall swarm, I'll be feeding that swarm that I got. I got to feed to help them draw stuff that's undrawn and put some food away for winter.
And what do you like? What do you like seeing going into fall?
50 pounds of honey per hive.
50 pounds, yeah. So I think that wraps it up for this episode of Beekeeping Buddies. Turn in next week for all of your beekeeping news and entertainment. Thanks, guys.